Well, first off, thank you everybody for staying for, we're getting to the end of the second day of a conference. It's now 4 o'clock, second last session, so thank you very much for still being here and paying attention. I appreciate the opportunity. I want to talk to you today about the thinking that went behind a product that we've introduced just in the last couple of months called Instant 6. The idea behind Instant 6 is that it's designed to make IPv6 content visible, IPv4 content visible to IPv6 users. I've got to work out how to use this. Here we go. First off, I'm Kevin Karp. I'm a Director of IPv6 Now. We're an Australian organisation that's been involved with IPv6 for some 3 years now. So the idea with Instant 6 is to make IPv6 visibility. In other words, make IPv4 content visible to IPv6 users in an easy manner. The idea is that we're offering a service rather than a product. So the intention is that the v4 content that is going to be seen by the v6 users is coming through us as a service provider. I'm going to give a brief history to justify what we're doing and to explain how our thinking came around. Basically, it's the same story that you've heard many times already over the past 2 days, but from a slightly different perspective. This chart here represents a chart of all of the /8s. You've probably seen versions of this chart before. The white space represents free /8s, and that's the way the chart looked in 1995. Explosive growth was happening on the internet at that stage. Work had begun on IPv6, but really only the visionaries were believing it was ever going to matter. By 2000, the chart looked like this. As you can see, there's slightly less white space. But still plenty of white space there. The dot-com craze was all happening, and there were 2 things that saved the address space from being exhausted as quickly as it was thought it was going to be. Those 2 things were NAT and name-based virtual hosting for websites. Version 1.1 of HTTP allowed multiple websites to share one IP address, so that conserved a lot of IP addresses required to show web content. So IPv4 was handling the situation very nicely. Come 2005, things start to look a little bit more tenuous. Alarm bells now started to ring, but despite the efforts of a few, indifference still prevailed within the industry, especially the web hosting and web and content creation industry. So even 5 years ago, not enough alarm bells were going on. Now we're in 2010. I apologise for the statements that I'm about to make. This chart is slightly out of date. It was as of January of this year. There were 18 blocks left as of January of this year, and this is the way the chart looked. Since January, and then even this comment is out of date, in May of this year, when I first gave this presentation, 8 further blocks had been consumed, and we were down to 7%. Now, since May, it's even worse. We're now down to less than 5%. I think the number that I heard yesterday was 12 blocks was what's remaining. Now, while all this is happening, there was some 15 years of development occurring in the web space. Content developers were out there creating websites and applications while all of this address exhaustion was beginning to build up. So in parallel to this process of the development of the internet, we've had the development of the web and all of its content and infrastructure. That involves not only the content that's actually on the sites, but web applications, and of course email now has become pervasive within business to the extent that people hardly use faxes anymore, and even small businesses are very dependent on email. What's next? We've heard this story before. There's going to be, when we get down to the last 5, each of the RIRs are going to receive their last address block allocation. This is extremely important for the region that I come from, because I'm from the APNIC region, and we believe that APNIC is going to be the first RIR to completely exhaust all of its address space. Sometime in 2011, speak to different people, you'll get different answers. Sometime in 2011, it's expected that the the IRRs will be allocated their last IPv4 addresses. And we expect that APNIC will be the first to hand out the last address to a member. So, where does that leave us? Will the sky fall in? That's the question that we always get asked. Is the sky going to fall in? Now our assessment is no. The sky will not fall in. We'll continue to keep on going. The internet will continue to work. What's going to happen? There's going to be IPv4 address trading. There's going to be attempts to recover IPv4 addresses. People are going to look at carrier-grade NATs, and every network and system administrator is thinking to himself, gee, aren't I glad that I've got that spare /24 in my back pocket that I haven't used. So whether we like it or not, our view is that IPv4 is going to be with us for years to come. We're going to have to live with it for years to come. We'd like not to, but nevertheless it's going to be there. We're stuck with it. Now, all of that content that's out there, we're going to have to live with that content that's out there as well. And we're going to have to live with the skill set of the users or the developers that created that content as well. So there's a view out there when they hear that story, oh, that means we're safe. IPv4 is going to be around for years, I don't need to change anything, everything's going to be good. But in the region that I come from, we've always got to be worried about the sharks, and that message is only almost true. And there's a couple of things that stop it from being true. The technology that makes that statement not true, from our perspective, is the mobile telephone. Mobile devices are going to be pervasive. They're already pervasive. I saw some stats last week that people are now, more web content is being viewed on mobile devices, handheld devices, than on desktops and laptops. Now, at least that's from my area in Australia. That was I was surprised to see it. I thought that might be the case in 12 months or 2 years' time, but it turns out it's already the case. More than that, from a technical standpoint, the long-term evolution, the LTE mobile phones are going to be V6 mandatory. Possibly they will be only V6. Comcast in the US has said that V6 will be mandatory and has already issued their specification for their next handheld models to the manufacturers and said it's got to have V6, it's got to be LTE compliant. The other thing that means that we can't be safe with the situation that we've got on IPv4 being around is that the markets are changing, and we've all heard how about the growth of India and the growth of China have meant that those two markets alone are changing the way we have to think. We have to start accommodating those two markets as well as handheld devices. Let's take a look at this problem that we've got with IPv4 and IPv6. At layers 1 and 2, that's the physical layer. The protocol layer, we've got at layer 3, that's where IPv4 and IPv6 come into the story, but pretty much they're like oil and water. They don't really mix. Our solution, Instance 6, really works at layer 7. In many respects, I'm probably speaking to an audience here that is more used to working at layer 1, 2 and 3, but our solution actually tries to cure the problem of making v4 content visible to v6 users at layer 7 rather than at a network layer. That has some advantages and disadvantages. I'll go through those in a few moments. Let's think about that content that I've been talking about. Latest stats that I've got from Netcraft in October of this year, 232 million, you might as well say 233 million websites, of which about 88 million are active. There's 15 plus years of content that's out there that people that are using v6 only devices will want to be able to see. What do those assets consist of? That 15 years worth of development consists of a whole lot of things. Email archives, security configurations, e-commerce setups, content along with the links, and plus all the web stats and reports that go along with that. And underpinning all of that is the DNS system. We've got to make sure that continues to work correctly. But who's creating those contents and who's looking after it? 15 years ago, we didn't really know the answer to that question. We thought the answer was either going to be the traditional IT department or it could be the people who look after advertising. We didn't really know what the answer to that question was. Now, 15 years later, we do know the answer to that question. predominantly, the vast bulk of all of that information that's out on the web, that 90 million active sites that we saw, is being created not by the technical departments, but being created by the creative departments, the advertising agencies, the marketing departments in corporations. May well be being looked after by the technical guys, but the content itself is being created by those more people-oriented departments. Now, their skill level is enough to get them by. They're not technical people. They don't really know V4 and V6, and they really don't want to know, because their real task in life is to get a message across to their audiences. So they're not really fast. They just want to get their message out. And solutions from their perspective need to just work. Hence the reason that we have all these content management systems and easy-to-use tools to develop the stuff that they do. They just want it to work. From the point of view of an IPv6 only user, someone using one of these LTE mobile phones, IPv4 content looks like a broken connection. That's the perspective that we've taken to this problem. Use the application layer to solve a broken connection. The application layer has many facilities built into it to deal with a broken connection already. Email has got redundancy built into it, DNS has got redundancy built into it. Let's use some of those facilities to cure this problem. That's the approach that we've taken. Now, you could take an approach of dual stacking, and we've covered all of that. And I'm not trying to pretend that dual stacking won't happen. Of course it will happen. Instance 6 and this approach is not a cure-all. It's not an approach that will fix everything, but it is an approach that can be used for a lot of those 90 million sites that are out there. So we're going to address this issue as a matter of redundancy at the application layer. The assets that we need to convert, we've got DNS assets, we've got email assets, we've got all the firewall configurations, we've got all the security issues that we need to be worried about, plus we've got the content itself. That needs to be part of our concern also. So our product is emphasising the visibility of the content and the services. We're not attempting to convert the network infrastructure with Instance 6. This is not a product for the technician. This is a product more for those creative developers that I was talking about. So that's something I've got to emphasise, because when I talk about Instance 6 to people, they start asking me questions about how this works and how that works and all the rest of it. And possibly I'm not the right person to answer all those questions, because I've got smart guys working back at the office that are coming up with these solutions. There are some limitations on what we've done. It doesn't apply to HTTPS content at the moment. Web content from other sites does not get converted over. Only the content from your own site is accessible by the V6 user. And we've discovered some issues with email as well, in particular the operation of SPF. This is what we've got. There we go. We've got a V4 website out there and a V6 only user over here. And in between, we've got our service being Instance 6. We've got web content that needs to get from the V4 website across to the V6 user. Instance 6 has got the job of converting the content from that V4 only instance into V6 only, into a V6 only information stream. The user doesn't know that Instance 6 is involved. The user is just on a V6 only connection. The DNS system is in operation, the Quad A record is correctly set up, and the V4 web content is being converted by Instance 6. Ideally, there'd then be a link back so that a user that's on their mobile phone that visits your website and finds out about a product or a service that you're selling and wants to make an inquiry, wants to send an email to the webmaster that has created that site. So we've got an extra feature whereby that V6 only user can send an email to the webmaster of that site content. At the moment, we've got two versions of the product, a free version and a paid-for version. With the free version, you only get the first link. You only get that. With the paid-for version, you also get the ability to send an email to the webmaster. So we're using HTTP application facilities to retrieve the v4 content on behalf of the v6 user, and we're sending that content to the v6 user. We're also using SMTP mail delivery facilities to send the email from the v6 user to the v4 webmaster. The third feature of the product at the moment is to provide web stats and reports to the webmaster that shows them what their traffic is, what the traffic stats are for their site in the v6 world. Because we're dealing with people who aren't extremely technical, we've tried to make the whole process as simple as possible. The process involved in order to use Instance 6 is very straightforward. You subscribe to you go to the website, to our website, instance6.com, and subscribe to either the professional or the free version. You get given straight away your IPv6 address for your website. That comes to you via an email. At that point, your site is visible in the v6 world. As soon as you receive the email, your site is visible. The one last remaining step that needs to be done is you need to update your DNS. So as a subscriber, you need to arrange for the Quad A record and the MX records to be created. We're working on seeing how we can get rid of that final step. We actually send the Quad A record and the MX record to the subscriber in the email that we send to them. We actually give them the whole record so that they can just drop it straight into their zone file. We'd prefer for them not to have to do that step, but that's where we're at the moment. As soon as they've updated the DNS, the content is visible and contactable without needing to use the IP address. All the content was visible via a v6 user as soon as they receive the email, but of course you have to type in the raw IP address inside the square brackets. We still know we've got things to do on the product. HTTPS is a problem. There's an awful lot of content out there that is secure content, and we want to make sure that we can display that content as well as HTTP content. We think we've got an answer to that, but we're working on it, and we still feel that there's further development to go before we can release it. As I said to you, we think we've got about 12 months worth of further development on the product to get it to the point where it's more complete. It's usable now, but we want to get to as many v4 sites as we possibly can. We want to improve the DNS support, and we also want to be able to provide the webmaster an ability to email back to the v6 user. That's not going to be particularly hard to do. We think that's quite straightforward to do. However, to do it in a fashion so that it's a clean implementation, that it's an arm's length implementation, and that it doesn't involve any future modifications to the existing infrastructure of the v4 webmaster, that might be a bit more tricky to do. We're trying to keep the whole process as simple as we possibly can. Okay, so the intention is IPv6 visibility as a service. I want to now tell you a story. I gave this presentation 2 weeks ago at the IPv6 Summit in Australia, in Melbourne. At the summit, one of the first speakers got up and spoke about his new offering. Oh, you can't see that link there. No. He got up and he had set up a facility especially for the delegates at the IPv6 Summit in Melbourne. And he'd set up a website, myanswers.mobi/IPv6, which you all should be able to go to, myanswers.mobi/IPv6. And he gave it to an audience just like this. At the end of the audience, of course, there was a question and answer session, and this gentleman opened up the floor so that he could answer questions about his product at an IPv6 Summit. And of course, what was the very first question that somebody put up their hand and asked? They asked, what's the Quad A, what's the v6 IP address for your site? Can I get to your site via v6? We had v6 connectivity, it was a v6 Summit. We want to get to your site via v6. And embarrassedly, he answered, well, no, I can't do that. We don't have any v6 connectivity set up for our website. So one of the organisers rushed in as soon as this had happened in the Q&A session. because I was out manning our booth. We had a booth at the summit. And he said, Kevin, quick, let's put this on instance 6, and then we can announce the v6 address. So I said, okay. I said, well, you're the organizer. We've made this easy to do. You sit down and subscribe to instance 6. I'm not going to do it. You subscribe as if you're the gentleman that was up there giving the presentation. So he did that. He sat down, went to the website, subscribed. A few seconds later, all done. Within 5 minutes, he'd received the email, which included the v6 address, that address up there. So at the next break in the summit proceedings, we could get up, rather not me, the organisers could get up and announce this is the v6 implementation of that site. And it had all been done. The only step that we hadn't done that day, that morning, was the changing of the DNS so that you could get to it on v6 without having to put in the actual v6 address. So we had to rely, of course you have to rely upon the network administrator who looks after the DNS records for that particular domain. And the My Answers people did that the following day, and so by the second day of the summit, it was available via both via the address as well as via the DNS. And I think that's still the case. You've all got v6 connectivity out there now. Someone might like to try it and confirm for me whether the site's still working on both the address as well as the domain name. Okay, I'd like to thank you for your attention and open up the floor to any questions that there might be on the floor. Here we go. Quick as a flash, this one down here.
Regarding site migration, I know that there's a lot of sites that use like third-party admin managers and stuff like that aren't going to be automatically converted anytime soon. Have you taken advantage of the fact about?
It's on our to-do list of how do we deal with content that doesn't come from the site owned by the webmaster, owned by that domain. And it's on our to-do list. Again, there's further work that we need to do to support that. It's part of our development program that we've got in place for the next 12 months, but we're not there yet. At the moment, we can only deal with content that comes from your domain. We can't deal with content that comes from somebody else's domain. So things like Google Analytics and other things like that, and ads are a problem, and we know we need to deal with it. Yes, sir?
How do you measure the relative performance of the site when it's going to your service versus someone who's setting it directly on the
There is a delay, and especially there's a delay at the moment because the Instance 6 servers are located in Sydney, Australia. So from here, there's a high latency, a 300 millisecond latency to get across the Pacific. We're setting up points of presence in other locations. We're setting up a point of presence here in America, and we'd like to set up one in Europe as well. All we can do to measure the problem that you're talking about is to put ourselves in the position of a web viewer, a web surfer, in those locations and measure what's actually happening for that viewer. What we provide are AW Stats reports for the webmaster to look at the amount of traffic that's coming to their site, but that doesn't do anything to answer your question about the performance. The only way we can measure performance is to put ourselves in the position of someone who's viewing the content. Oh, certainly. Yeah, whether it's on a production basis and it is given to the webmasters on an ongoing basis, we haven't made that decision yet, but certainly as part of our testing, yes, and our rollout to production, yes, we certainly will be looking into that and providing that to whoever asks for it. We won't be revealing any confidential information in doing that. Any further questions? All looking good. Thank you very much for your time.